Welcome to the monthly Japan Business Seminars by Scaling Your Company. Our topic for today is social media in Japan for business. We are joined by two experts on this topic. Firstly is Dustin Ikeda. Dustin Ikeda is a co-founder of Hashi Media, a social media marketing agency that assists companies in establishing their brands in Japan. Their agency is trusted by many reputable companies such as HP, Alibaba Japan, Asus, and Uber Eats, to name a few. You can visit their website at hashimedia.com. Our next guest is Dimitri Shimaniuk. He is the director of Engine Media KK, a company that helps automotive dealers and brands with their social media marketing. The company is trusted by many automobile manufacturers, dealers, and garages. Their website is at enginemedia.co. And lastly, our host for today is Tyson Bettino. Tyson has founded two successful companies in Japan, with one of them becoming one of the top 10 largest English language schools for adults in Japan. So let's dive into the seminar.
How to develop their middle managers and leaders and also CEOs to scale their companies so they can manage companies that generate millions and tens of millions of revenue. Cool. I also served as a mentor for 500 Global, which is probably a top 3 startup accelerator in the world. And you can see me at scalingyourcompany.com. And we have our podcast. We have a foreigner-friendly Japan investor list. We have free seminars like this one. You can find our YouTube channel and a ton of articles as well at scalingyourcompany.com. And right before we jump in, Pete, could you post a survey link in the chat? We want to survey the audience just so the speakers can get an idea of who's attending and they can maybe tailor their pitch to the audience. And we'll give everyone 3 minutes. It's in the Zoom chat. I'll give everyone 3 minutes to check that out and fill it in. And Pete, they don't need to put in their name, right?
No, no need to.
Okay, good. Yeah, so you don't need to put in your name. It is anonymous. So for those just joining, we just put a survey in the chat, and if you could fill that in. And Pete, can you see the results coming in?
I want to check.
I'll give it about 1 more minute.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, let's get started. And Pete, you can send that to our LinkedIn chat group. So social media business in Japan for businesses. I already went over that. So question 1, what popular social media platforms in the West are also popular in Japan? And I'll pass it off to Dimitri.
Thank you. Well, it depends if you consider YouTube a social network or the modern television. I'd say it is a social network, and the numbers are quite ridiculous. Almost everybody in Japan watches YouTube, so that would be the largest. But the more traditional ones, of course, you have Line, the next biggest, Twitter, and then Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok is still, despite a very sharp rise, it's still hasn't caught up to Facebook as yet, but I'd say those would be the main 5 or 6 in Japan.
Yeah, and to touch on that, I'll just list the top 3 most used socials in the USA, just to give a comparison with those in Japan. So the top three in the US are number one, Facebook, number two, Instagram, and number three, TikTok. And then again, the Japanese ones are number one, Line, number two, Twitter, and number three, Instagram. So you can see that the only platform that's on both top three lists is Instagram. So I would say it's pretty much as popular here in Japan as it is in the West. And you can think of it and use it in kind of the same way as you would in the West. And as for Twitter, it's even more popular here in Japan than in the US. So it's actually fair to say that it's the number one social media in Japan. Line and YouTube technically have more users, but they're not really traditional social media in that, like, Line is more of a messaging platform and YouTube is kind of a content consumption type of platform. So yeah, it's fair to say Twitter is number one. So in summary, Instagram and Twitter would be your core two internationally that are here in Japan as well. Tyson, you're muted.
Sorry, ones that are popular in the West, but maybe not so popular in Japan.
Yeah, here Snapchat is pretty much non-existent. WhatsApp as well, you know, if we're talking messaging apps, is way down the list as well. But yeah, things like Pinterest, Twitch, Discord, LinkedIn, they do have small user bases here, but very, very minor in comparison to the West. How about you, Dustin? What do you think is not very popular here?
Yeah, so the first one I want to touch on is Facebook. So it's obviously used, so it's the number 4 in Japan, but it's nowhere near as ubiquitous as it is in the USA and worldwide. So it's the number 1 by far in the USA and worldwide, but in Japan it's just number 4. And actually, year over year, the Facebook user base is actually shrinking in Japan. And yeah, as you know, Facebook makes you show your real name. So in general, Japanese people are less inclined to use it for leisure. It's more of a business communications type of tool. There's a lot of group chats in Facebook Messenger done for business, and that's kind of like its primary purpose in Japan. So it's more of a niche platform rather than the number 1 ubiquitous platform as it is worldwide. Yeah, so that's the first one. And then TikTok, that's actually also used in Japan, and it's perceived as very trendy, but there's nowhere near as many users in Japan as in the USA. So in the USA, TikTok users make up 42% of internet users, but in Japan, it's just about 19%. So that's about half. But everybody knows about TikTok, and it's a mainstream talking point, and there are advertisers, corporate accounts using TikTok, but it doesn't have that user count that it does in the USA. So it's also a little bit more niche in Japan. And then things like Snapchat, LinkedIn, Reddit, they're almost non-existent compared to the US.
Thanks, guys. And now we know probably what not to do. I think one question everyone is pretty curious about is, so what are some social media platforms that are unique to Japan that we could utilize?
So with Line, even though it is first and foremost a messaging app, they have the Voom tab, I guess you would call it, which is more or less a feed, right? So a lot of, you know, probably as Dustin said, a lot of corporate accounts that have a TikTok account, of course, everybody would have a Line account as well. But with the Line account, they use it more as like a one-way mail magazine, like an email magazine almost, where, you know, if it's a B2C company, they send out coupons, they send out special offers and things like that. So Ourselves, in our company, we don't have a lot of data. All of our clients have just started using Line for those purposes, but it's more like one-way communication, which is, somewhat accepted in Japan as the norm. But there's very little interaction on things like Line. But also, I wanted to touch on, a very old Nichan, so 2-channel, or as it's now called, five channel. They were very popular at one stage, but then of course you have all the controversy surrounding it. The users, there's no way to pinpoint a user to a name, to an actual sign in. So basically anything goes, and there was a lot of bad press due to libel or crime. Even the Tokyo Police Department we're looking into it. So yeah, things like Line and 2-channel, of course, they'd be very Japan centric, but may not be the best fit for all businesses. And one more sort of trend that we are seeing here is there's a network called Pixiv, and Pixiv basically for artists. A similar network would be Behance in the West. So things like this, perhaps we could see a small rise in the next few years of very, very niche, very specific social networks for Japan, because the theory goes of a lot of users, they want to get on the network for their specific hobby or their specific interest. They don't want to be subjected to, like family photos and ads and things like that. So that could be one trend that we're seeing unique in Japan.
And before I pass it off to Dustin, Dimitri, if you could put the link for Pixiv, I think that might be a new one for a lot of people. But off to you, Dustin.
Yeah. So I'll just touch on a couple of them. So the first one is Nico Nico Doga. So that one's kind of like YouTube, but it skews more on the otaku side of things with like gaming, anime, Vocaloid, like Hatsune Miku type of content. I think she has a lot of content on there. So we've worked with some creators here in the past to promote games, like game launches in Japan, because it's kind of like, YouTube or Twitch, where there are gamers streaming on there. Not streaming, but posting videos. So if you're in that space, the otaku type of space, it's definitely worth checking out this channel to work with some creators on there. And then the second one is Ameba Blog. So this is a huge blog site in Japan. There's a ton of blog sites in Japan. It's really popular. But this one in particular is used by celebrities. It has a primarily female skewing audience, and there's like ads and sponsored blogs available for your marketing. They have a press kit available, so I think it's in Japanese though. But if you just go to Ameba Blog, you can see their marketing materials and options that you can probably use.
Cool. And I'll share one more. I just posted it in the chat, but it's a app called Lips, and it's a community and word of mouth marketing app focused on cosmetic and beauty products in Japan. So yeah, I put the link in the chat, and I think Dimitri just added that too. Next, social media utilization in Japan. So I guess, should companies stick to Japanese ones or stick to international ones? What are your recommendations?
I would say follow the 80-20 rule. Start with the 80% and stick to international platforms first. As Dustin pointed out, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and if you do have the resources, go YouTube as well. It's just a lot better in terms of coverage. There's way more users, and you could argue that a lot of the uniquely Japanese platforms do have a more targeted user base, but still you can't argue with math. So I would go large first, and then with the remaining 20% of your resources, time, budget, what have you, then you could test out line business accounts, paid line advertising, things like that, and perhaps the niche platforms as well, but only as a an additional extra to go that 20% further. So yeah, I would also just be careful when using international ones like TikTok. Obviously, there's a lot of bad press in the West about security, about it being a Chinese-owned company and data issues. So we always recommend clients, if they do use TikTok in Japan, to have a separate device that has a separate SIM card that's not connected to the Wi-Fi. So you really protect your business, because it, especially in Japan, like one mistake like that and literally heads will roll in the company. So we don't want any risks like that coming in via social media networks.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Dimitri on this. You should stick to the international ones at first. Like I said, Instagram and Twitter in particular are the top two to consider. Oh, sorry. So
Pete, could you mute whoever was speaking?
So besides Line, all the top social media platforms in Japan are international anyway, as you saw from that list. And operationally, your team won't have to learn an entirely new platform with a Japanese interface and just like Japanese principles. Like maybe you have to just like call them to get an account set up or something like that. So yeah, definitely start with the international ones and move into those Japanese platforms if you see a specific niche opportunity. And I also want to touch on the use case. So I think mostly we've been talking today about your own social media. And yeah, for those, stick with Instagram and Twitter at first. And then depending on your niche case, you can go into TikTok, Facebook, or those Japanese platforms. But for influencer marketing, you can go with YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Those are good platforms for creators. And Twitter, there's also a presence there, but it's kind of a supplement. So maybe a YouTuber will create a piece of content for your brand and then post it on Twitter. Like, I made a YouTube video. So that's kind of how Twitter's used. And then for advertising, YouTube and Line have the most user reach. So those are definitely worth considering. And then Meta, which includes Facebook and Instagram, that algorithm's really powerful for advertising. So even though it doesn't have the user base on the Facebook side, it's definitely worth considering for advertising. And then the mailing list style, as Dimitri touched on, definitely use Line for that.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit. I am very huge online for any physical business, meaning if you have like a physical store, I'm huge online. The reason for that is when, and this is towards Japanese customers and like thousands and thousands of them, I found that an email, the open rate would probably be around 40%, 40 to 50%. And Line, it was, I think, around 70 to 80%. So like, and you only had to spend, I think, like $50 a month. But, to get a 20%, 30% open rate increase, that is ridiculously cheap. And I'm going to share a link in the chat. So this is actually, my friend created this company called Crescendo Labs as part of the 500 Global Japan Market Entry for foreign startups. I helped them with their Japan market entry, and they make a Line marketing automation tool. I sent the link for the Japanese or the English site. They have a Japanese site as well. The software is in Japanese as well. But what it can do is similar to like when you used to go to websites and you would see like they would have the spinning wheel. Like if Neil Patesh, he's doing some kind of crap like that. But they have that kind of like the spinning wheel, you get a prize. They have like around 7 to 8 different types of games, which they can give people like coupons and things like that for Line. And yeah, it looks pretty good. And the other one is they with his software, you can send a Line message to your customer individually at the time they're most likely to open a line message. So like you'll send them line messages, and over time, they will track each individual when they open, most likely to open. So that even increase the open rates even more. I would say for small businesses, I think their software is a bit probably unaffordable. It's probably more for like the medium-sized corporate users of Line. But yeah, it's really, really good software. And yeah. So next is, what are some key differences between social media in the West versus Japan?
Okay. The one thing that I want to touch on here is social media management or community management, right? So once you have all your ads going out there, once you have your organic content posted, on a regular schedule, the way that B2C companies respond and interact with the comments and messages needs to be very different to the West. Like here, of course, you have politeness, you have keigo, the polite version of Japanese. You really, really need to make sure that you have a native speaker who's experienced in customer service as your community manager here in Japan. Even if it's somebody part-time or you're reaching out to an agency, unlike elsewhere with anonymity, some of the comments that you'll get may be very direct. So for example, like Twitter users or even Facebook users, a lot of them forget that it's their real name on there. So even though the question or the inquiry may come in a very casual tone, you as the company need to respond in a very polite tone. So for example, a big difference is some of you may see, the gold standard of corporate social media overseas being, say, an account like Wendy's, the fast food chain, or maybe 7-Eleven. Their community managers are very witty, very, at times there's some clapping back involved, like witty responses to complaints and things like that. That is an absolute no-no in Japan. Huge no-no. It's not seen as funny or clever as it is in the West. It's just seen as rude, and you will get not only, like pushback from those users or those users that read it, like word will spread, and it's just no-go here. So polite responses, even for complaints, is the way to go. Politeness can't be stressed enough. So it's a case of kill the negative comments with kindness. And often, in the past, we've seen that a negative comment met with a very positive, very apologetic, very polite response. Oftentimes, the next 2 days, you'll see the comment gone. Like maybe the person who commented was in a bad mood, they read your response and how polite it is, and then take down their original complaint. So we've seen that on numerous occasions. So that's the biggest thing that stands out for me as the biggest difference between the West and Japan.
Yeah, and to highlight, and that's based on Dimitri's experience managing social media accounts for automobile dealerships.
Exactly. Yeah. So high ticket, long sales process. Everybody has their opinion on cars, so we're dealing a lot with a wide variety of comments.
Dustin.
Yep. So I actually have 5 main points here. So the first one is that, privacy and anonymity online is really important for Japanese people. According to a survey done by some ministry of the government, only 23% of people use their real name on Twitter. And you'll see on Twitter that lots of profiles have a username of just like random numbers and letters, and they have 0 posts or something. And you might assume that's a bot, but that's probably actually a real person. So that's something to keep in mind. Second thing is there's fewer engagements per user. So a typical Facebook user in the USA likes 10 posts per month. And in Japan, they only like 2 posts per month. And a typical Facebook user in the USA comments 7 times per month, when in Japan it's 1 time. So one of the reasons for this is the privacy point that I mentioned earlier. And engagement is kind of stepping out of the box of anonymity and kind of vetting something publicly. So that's something that they're less inclined to do in general. And so lower engagements than you're used to seeing doesn't necessarily mean that the message hasn't gotten through. So you can adjust your engagement benchmarks for Japan, and you can think of engagements as a little bit more valuable than what you're used to. The third thing is different costs. So some ad costs are generally lower, like CPMs, CPCs, and I think the primary reason for that is lower competition. It's just not as saturated on some of these ad platforms as it is in the West. But there are some higher costs, like cost per page like on Facebook. And I think one of the reasons for that is because that audience is too small. There's not a lot of like low-hanging fruit to pick from. Another cost that's different is influencer costs, and they're typically higher because of exorbitant agency fees. Not us, but just the Japanese ones. So you should plan your budget and benchmarks accordingly. Yeah, so some costs might be different from what you're used to. The fourth one, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the fourth one is campaign, like campaigns, the loan word for campaigns. And those are essentially themed sales promotions. So things like giveaways, discounts. So according to polls, this content is the #1 reason Japanese people follow business accounts. So maybe in the USA, this is considered kind of spammy, kind of like not too clever, stuff like that, but it's not really perceived that way at all here. It's quite positive. So definitely consider adding those types of content to your mix. And then the fifth one is design trends and like the need for information up front. So the West generally prefers a clean, minimalist aesthetic, and they prefer seeing the detailed information upon click-through, whereas Japan prefers the text and information up front before the click. So you can see on Japanese social media, there's much more text on images in general. And this isn't bad design. Like some people come here and they say, wow, the design is so bad, but it's not bad design. It's just a cultural preference. And so you should make sure your designs are compatible with this taste in Japan.
Yeah, what design works, what design doesn't work. So that's good and bad, if it works or it doesn't. Yeah. And I have similar experiences with Facebook ads in that the CPMs are much lower here. In some cases, I've seen it. This information is old, but it's about 2 years ago when I used to do it religiously. I think I saw it was like half the price compared to the US.
Yeah, that's about right. Might be even less now.
Yeah, exactly.
If I could add one more point about attribution as well, probably ties in with a lot of what Dustin said. Sometimes it's not very clear to see where, for a physical business, to see how the customer came to the business. Like maybe they saw an ad, but then they wouldn't follow your digital funnel. They would just see it and then go to the physical store. Whereas perhaps in the West, you'll get some sort of, they'll be cookied, or, in the past they would be cookied, pixeled, and then you can sort of trace the user's interaction. Here with especially with car dealers, it just goes cold, abrupt, and then a month later they buy a car, and there's no sort of traceable path for you to follow. But hence why the information up front and those elements are much more important in Japan, as you guys said.
And I'll ask you guys one more question. I think also when you do your campaigns or creative in Japan, you wouldn't pick at competitors, right?
Yep, super important. The closest that I've seen is like, well, company A does this and company B does this. They're very, very unspecific. They will never go after a competitor by name. I have a few theories as to why that is. It's actually illegal to like libel somebody, to write something negative about somebody. Like you could get taken to court. And that thing may be 100% true, but the way that the legal system is set up here, there was a case a few years ago of let's say a client of a business wrote an anonymous Google review, a negative anonymous Google review, and judging by the content of the review, the business then took that commenter to court, and it was settled, but the commenter still needed to pay several $1,000s US, obviously in yen. But so it really does happen. Businesses with nothing to do would do actually prosecute. So this is, I think, this is the real cause of anonymity in terms of, and the lack of picking at competitors by name.
Yeah, I remember that case. And even if the person is correct in their complaint towards the company.
Exactly. It's wild. for Westerners, it's a wild concept, but it really does happen here in Japan.
So as a tip, as someone who's employed lots of people, if you complain about an employer, we don't do it, but if you complain about an employer on a job board, wait at least 6 months. Don't do it immediately after. The HR department will know who you are immediately, or companies as well. So give it 3 to 6 months, or wait for someone else to put a negative complaint, then jump on the bandwagon, but give it time. Hey, so what are some examples of foreign companies' social media strategy ads in Japan, and how would you have improved it?
For this one, Dustin, would you like to go first?
Sure. So this is just like an anecdote. So a really popular fitness product from the USA, they approached us about social media marketing in Japan, and everything was going well, and we thought, okay, things are looking really positive. But I think due to some internal issue or something, someone just vetoing something probably at the final hour, they went with a local Japanese vendor instead of ourselves. And so we kind of like kept tabs on it. But yeah, the account ended up being run by a fitness influencer who had a following on Japanese social, but clearly wasn't equipped to do marketing for a company. And that person even put a link to his personal social account on the company account bio. So that was quite unprofessional, I think. And about a year later, they ended up failing and deleting the account. And I don't think I see any market presence for that product. I see a lot of competitors here, actually. So I think they've pretty much lost their opportunity in Japan. So I will say that I think it's hard to go more wrong than what they did, but we definitely would have improved that situation. Instead of just one influencer, we would have connected them to a multitude of influencers that fit their image through regular campaigns. And we'd combine that with, use cases, lifestyle content to kind of round out the content for them. And along with, proper community management and analytics, which one single person can't really do by themselves. So that's my story.
Nice job not naming names specifically. And and I think that's a violation of the advertisement rule of 3, rule of 5, or rule of 10 in some cases, where a person has to see something 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. If you just go with one influencer, it's not enough touch points. And so I was going to say one more point, but I have forgot it.
I've got one possibly to rival Dustin's. Very, very similar genre though, of story. Sometimes you see in Japan, and this I think will be quite applicable to companies that are trying to enter Japan. Sometimes you see your product taking off organically in Japan, or you have one distributor in Japan and they goes, yep, no worries, I'll sell your product here. And then the here's where it all went wrong, is letting that distributor control your social media, your brand social media in Japan. So what we noticed, I won't give any specifics, but yeah, it was a manufacturer with a consumer product in a particular niche. That's as broad as I'll go. They had one person in Japan just posting to their Instagram, and the Instagram was created. It was brand name, slash underscore JP. So they were aware that this account exists in Japan, and they were sort of like, yep, hands off, you just run with it. And that person wasn't a native Japanese speaker. So what you get was, and this was even before AI translation, you got really bad Google Translate. The graphics that were used overseas, of course, with bad Google translation text, like photoshopped over the top. It was horrendous. So this, not only is it a non-native Japanese speaker, but they're also a non-professional social media manager, representative of their products in Japan. And it was just clear that it was an afterthought. When we sort of approached them, we pointed it out. They did change the person that was doing it to a local Japanese speaker. So they went one rank up, but still, like the quality of the writing didn't improve marginally, but at least it had less mistakes. But I think by far their biggest problem was people were commenting on their posts saying, where can I buy it? Where can I try it on? And it was just like phone is just left ringing. There was no interaction. People weren't, even posting links. They weren't directing them anywhere. So the users kind of really, you could feel for them. They wanted the product. There was just nobody to follow up. So it was just it was way down the list of their priorities in terms of their global sales. But Japan is such a fickle mistress that, all those people that perhaps saw an independent YouTube reviews by, as Dustin said, by an influencer, by somebody with a YouTube channel, they had no way to connect to the brand, and they had no way to buy the actual product. So yeah, it's, never mind losing that particular sale, they were damaging their reputation forever.
And that's a common, for B2C and B2B, that is a common fail point where they don't provide enough localized support. And it's
Exactly.
Localized support does not mean have a foreigner with even N1 Japanese doing that. As someone with N1, I would never do that.
Exactly.
I would hire someone Japanese for it.
Exactly.
And I remember Dustin's example, the influencer. If my thought is like an influencer who's really good at monetization has probably already monetized their product and probably might be too expensive to help, or probably won't be helping most companies. So by definition, if you're working with an influencer to run your social media, likelihood of them being good at monetization is probably not one of their strengths.
Yeah.
And I think for the B2B listeners here, I think one common is trying to create your LinkedIn profile like you would create your American style, or like targeting foreigners. But I'll post a link in here of this guy. So he's the guy for LinkedIn Japan for Japanese people. So he's who Japanese people go to learn about how to do LinkedIn to Japanese people. He's written probably 2 books on it. Check his profile. There are some subtle differences in the design. And yeah, you can check that out. Sorry, quick plug, but me and my buddy Chris from Japan Switch has launched our website and SEO and MEO. I'll say I'm probably one of the best people in Google Maps in Japan. Very, very good. I've ranked Tokyo many times. I've ranked all over Japan in Japanese and English. And we can also create websites for small businesses and SEO for small businesses. If you're a medium-sized business, probably going to Dustin is a better option. but for small businesses, we can help you. Okay, next. And Pete, if you could put our marketing agency link in the chat, that would be awesome. And next is social media as a marketing tool for businesses. So next, what are some common mistakes you see companies entering Japan make?
Yep, to follow along from the last anecdote is, just hiring somebody because they think they know they can speak Japanese. Get a good copywriter, get a good native copywriter, and get a good account or community manager on social with extensive customer service experience. Because even if you're running a campaign, a paid social on the Meta platform or Twitter campaign, anything like that, you need to be ready for people commenting and messaging you. So yeah, not hiring a community manager or somebody from customer service to answer messages, number one. And a few other ones is obviously translating, but not actually localizing the content. If we have some time later on, there's a massive popular app that did this really, really well. Don't be afraid of localizing your offer as much as necessary if you are committed to being successful in Japan.
So for me, the biggest theme for common mistakes companies entering Japan make is not putting in the upfront work and research required. So one thing would be relying on strategy and insights from other regions instead of scrutinizing everything for Japan specifically and building from the ground up. And given those unique social media cultural points we talked about earlier, the privacy, things like that, there's a lot of prep work to enter Japan specifically. So as Dimitri touched on, the customer support staff, how to surmount lower trust in foreign brands, how to position yourself for that. Your software stack, it might not work because Japanese as a language is very different. There's no spaces. There's many softwares that just don't work for keywords, things like that, social listening, that you'll have to get a Japanese specific solution for. So localization, very key. And this isn't necessarily social media, but lack of a commitment to improving the product for Japan specifically is also a big thing that can cause your Japan entry to not be as successful as you wanted.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with the B2B space. And I think a lot of the things that Dimitri and Dustin said apply the same for B2B. When I was helping the marketing entry for a 500 global or just sales and marketing entry, it's I would say as a pre-seed seed stage company, if there's any startups, the likelihood of you doing market entry, I think it might be too early. I think it's really a Series A level company. A Series A means you've received like 4 to 5 million, 10 million in investment. And if you've only received like 500,000, 1 million in your home country and you want to go into the Japan market, I mean, your product really needs to be really robust. And really, like Dustin's point, like you will have to change features for Japan. You'll have to listen to listeners. And also with the marketing, you have to focus on different features as well sometimes. And also localization. What I always tell companies is if you're not willing to translate in Japanese, go home. Or like localize. It's don't waste your time and money. Unless you're Brad Pitt and you might be able to get away with it, but most likely you're not. So let's say save your money and let's say do your market entry at a better time. So this one, we do have some marketers and marketing agencies listening, but what are some common mistakes you see marketers or marketing agencies make?
Oh, Tyson's gone silent, but
sorry.
I'll pick it up here.
Go for it.
All good. It's probably underestimating how much time it'll take for something to take off in Japan, or to just get the result for your client. And truth be told, we've done this ourselves in the past and learned from it. It's it's really easy to underestimate how much volume and frequency you need for both social content posting or running ads and things like that before you actually find your ad target user fit. A lot of clients, they have an idea about what they want, and it's not really based on any sort of market research, right? So it's a personal opinion or a personal judgment without any experimentation. And the tendency from clients, of course, is to try and get you to overproduce one piece of content versus trying a whole variety of things and then narrowing it down to what's actually getting a good response in the short, medium, and long term. So yeah, I would just say underestimating how long something would take to get traction. Dustin?
Yeah, so one is just kind of relating to Dimitri's point, over promising, under delivering. So hopefully you're not talking to an agency or marketer that is just lying to you, though it might happen. And if expectations aren't realistic from the brand side, it's the agency's role to inform them of that upfront and establish realistic benchmarks that work within the confines of the allocated budget, both financial and manpower wise. So yeah, definitely, it could be an honest mistake of, we have these unrealistic expectations, but your Japan partner should have the experience to reel that in and let you know what realistic benchmarks are possible and achievable. The next thing would be hyper focusing on a specific discipline of marketing and not considering the broader picture. So, for example, like Google SEM, like Google search, it's great for capturing existing demand, but not good at generating demand. So, for example, like locksmith near me. If you have a brand new product, not like a locksmith, people aren't actually searching for it. So you need to educate people on your brand, and Google is not the platform that you should be using for that. So on the flip side, social media generally wouldn't be as efficient as Google at generating sales from existing demand, but it excels at the thing Google can't do, which is, educating people, building your brand, building brand affinity, things like that. So I think agencies, especially at the smaller scale, should specialize, but always keep an eye on the bigger picture and where your specific niche fits into the bigger picture. And then finally, hyper focusing on pet metrics or vanity metrics like CPC or bounce rate and treating it as an actual KPI. So I define KPIs like Google defines KPIs. So this is their definition. So a KPI is synonymous with an objective. It's clear, measurable. It has a defined time frame. So it's something like increase t-shirt sales by 10% over the next 6 months. And then metrics, not KPIs, but metrics, they're useful, but they're not the thing that you care most about. So in the previous example, KPI is to increase t-shirt sales by 10% over the next 6 months, while non-KPI metrics would be things like CPM, CPC, CTR. They're a piece of the puzzle that helps you diagnose why you did or didn't achieve that KPI, but not the KPI itself. So I've seen and worked with people that are too hyper-focused on, I think, these metrics like, yeah, we really need to get bounce rate under 60% or something like that. But really, that's just a means to an end, I think. And I think both in your specific channel and the metrics you're looking at, you have to zoom out and see what is your actual goal and see how the puzzle pieces fit together.
I'll go from a B2B angle, but a common mistake I see are is, or this is more a general B2B issue that I see, is that foreigners who do market entry, they hire Japanese people who can't sell. I think like 75% of the time they hire Japanese people who can't sell, and they don't know how to train them to sell. So I'm going to explain how it relates to you as a marketing agency marketer. But so one is they hire people who can't sell, who have no network. And two, they don't hire like a sales coach. So like I have, if you listen to my guest on the podcast, Fuminori Gunji, he's a sales expert. He coaches companies how to do sales. I also coach companies how to do sales, but they don't coach them. And so they don't get sales. And how it impacts you is you make a contract with a company who can't sell when you're, let's say, doing the marketing for them. And therefore you lose them as a client because they leave Japan prematurely. So it's just something to be aware of, like try to gauge how good their sales staff is, because that would create a, let's say, a quitter risk for your end. And also, if you have sales staff, he's actually in the chat or in the participants, but listen to the episode with John Kirsch. He's done market entry probably more than 4 times for tech companies, and I highly recommend his episode, and I'll put that in the chat. And moving on, what advice would you give to an established company that wants to start social media in Japan?
Right. So if I can start on the tactical level, and then maybe Dustin can kick it up a notch to the strategic level. On a tactical level, even if you don't understand Japanese, you should really have a look at Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, any other platform that you're considering, and try to find the type of users that you think you'll be targeting with your service or product. That way you can get a first glimpse and a base pulse of what the market is doing on social, like how they're interacting, because it may be very different to your country, to back home. So I would go really like just immerse yourself as a business owner or as a international marketer and really have a look at it firsthand. Of course, translation comes into it. You can do that quite easily on Instagram. Just have a look how people are interacting and what they're doing naturally, like organically, without the ads. And then, and then find a provider or find a partner who has their finger more or less on the pulse in terms of not only the platform, but also the target market, so to speak. So one thing is just running social ads, and that's great, but also take a look at how your provider is doing organic social media. That involves comments, replying to messages, as I've said before, but also like are they using new features of that platform? A very good example of this, when Reels first came out on Instagram, like all social media platforms, they want you to use that new feature. Therefore, they'll boost your reach if you use that new feature on the platform. So just take a look at how your provider and how your partner is using these features, these platforms for existing clients, right? And maybe it's something that your provider or your partner can't talk about openly, but I'm sure they can give you, like a quick tour in a private meeting somewhere. So I would say, just really take a look at yourself, start at the ground level, and look at how these users of social media are interacting in Japan. Over to you, Dustin.
Yep. So just zooming out a little bit, it's quite simple. I would need to know a little bit more about their company and their strategy, but these 3 questions are what I would ask them, and these are the building blocks I would say that they should have sorted internally before hiring the manpower to execute internal or external. So first is, what channels are you thinking about using? And then second, what are your goals and KPIs? And then third, what financial or human resources have you committed to the marketing? So once you have all of those things sorted, then you can start to go tactical and get into the weeds of it and start executing. But I think those are the 3 questions you need to have solid answers for before you start.
Thank you very much. And for those who are, let's say, companies that are listening, how can they choose the right social media agency or freelancer?
So many clients just straight out of the gate very rightfully ask the question, have you helped companies, have you worked with companies like ours before? So they're looking for, I guess, a case study, that agency or that company. So like, are they basically familiar with that product? You could also ask questions such as, have you targeted our target market? Because that's very, very, I guess, that's very dependent on brand recognition. So somebody from, say automotive brand A, which is like a domestic luxury brand, is going to have much bigger success than somebody, than an import brand Z, right? For example. So I would definitely ask questions like, how have you targeted our target market and how did it go? And also, how long ago was this? Because as we all know, social media changes very quickly, and what worked last year may or may not work this year. So I guess time frame is really important. Like, how good were you, or how good was the marketing agency or company when they were last batting, right? So if you have a budget in mind, obviously, second point, the budget conversation always comes up. And I guess the Western way of doing things is just saying, here's what I have, what can you do with it? Versus if you're approaching a Japanese company, maybe they will ask you a lot of questions about the specifics of your campaign and either give you a customized quote or give you like a menu list, something like that. So this budget negotiation dance is quite different to overseas, whereas overseas we've got this amount of money assigned, what can you do with it? And then you would compare that marketing professional or that agency based on the list of deliverables and obviously what they think the KPIs will be from that. So when dealing with Japanese clients, of course, it's a much more intricate dance. They will always ask, what are the rates first? And it's quite, it's quite a tricky dance because it really depends on, as Dustin pointed out, what channels and what goals and what KPIs are you looking for. So it's just a different direction to approach the same budget problem. So one point as well that I'd like to add is, it may be really hard to assess if your campaign is going to be in Japan and the copywriting will be in Japanese. It's going to be really hard for non-Japanese speakers to assess and compare the level of copywriting a marketing provider can offer. So it's important to get maybe a Japanese, not a Japanese acquaintance, but like an actual Japanese consultant, a third party, hire them hourly, do something like that, but get a second opinion, get a third opinion on, how does this company deal with their writing, especially. I think, that will really help you avoid the same type of situations that I talked about in the previous anecdote of you really don't know if your marketing professional in Japan is representing you and your brand well. So yeah, and the other point is, of course, look for honesty and test it out. Be actually prepared to ask and actually receive constructive criticism, because that's how you can know if a provider is being honest or not, or if they're just another yes man. So really, really ask them, maybe you can throw a few curveball questions in it, throw some, obvious mistakes. It's a mistake and just offer it to them as a, what do you think of this? Like, how would you treat this? What do you think about this? Because if somebody just says, yep, no problem, we can do this as is, then they're just an order taker. You just tell them what they want to do and they just do it. Therefore, some companies try to offload that responsibility, saying, hey, we did exactly what you told us to do. We're not responsible. But I think if you're taking the Japanese approach to forming long-term relationships and partnerships in this country, I think you really need to work with someone with that honesty, that if you're really about to step on a landmine, they'll tell you about it and they'll say, look, we wouldn't use this because, and here are the reasons. So yeah, and of course, not to forget that it's a fairly small market compared to the West or compared to the English-speaking market. So a lot of companies know other companies. So even if that one particular company may not be right for you, you can always ask them for a referral, or maybe they'll be able to recommend a direction for you, even if you don't end up working together, because who knows, maybe you'll work with them in the future. So those would be my points.
Yeah, and those are good. I was going to touch on yes men. But yeah, definitely be very suspicious of an agency you're talking to that's just saying yes, because yeah, as Dimitri said, like it's the agency's role to push back on certain ideas that they don't think will work. It's kind of a consultative role. So if they're just saying yes to everything, that's definitely not a good thing, even though it might make you feel good in the moment during the sales process. That definitely yeah, like as Dimitri said, maybe you can give them a little trap or something just to see what happens. And also look out for agencies that commit most of their resources to the sales team. So they have like the greatest pitch decks and salespeople in the world, but once the contract is signed, you're handed off to like an intern level manager for the fulfillment. And so when you're screening, ask to speak with the person who will handle your account and get clarity on that side of it once the contract is signed. The other thing is, don't expect to hire an agency or freelancer to handle your entire strategy and execution A to Z. So you'll have to have that internal knowledge to hold that agency accountable. So like those 3 questions I asked before, know those answers and hold your agency or vendor accountable for your KPIs. And finally, you don't have to go with the big name agencies. I see, I think everybody knows the big name agencies, but just anecdotally, the prices are very, very high. Quality may vary, and actually a lot of the work is outsourced anyway. So yeah, you can definitely find good quality at not big name prices elsewhere.
If somebody's going,
I'll go ahead.
If somebody's going via Dentsu, it may actually be Dustin and Dustin's team doing your work. So you might as well just go direct to
skip
medium,
the middleman.
small companies. Yep.
I think people would be shocked if they knew how much of it was outsourced.
Oh yeah.
And what the margin is.
I'll say any agency I know with probably 3 or more people, they're doing some sort of work outsourced from the major agencies, like pretty much everyone. Cool. And I would say my other, just to add on to what you guys mentioned, is I would fill out the salesperson, meaning I would ask them probably a question like, how do you like working there? Then I would follow up with, oh, how long have you been working there? And that will give you an idea of how much influence they have within their organization. If there's someone who's been there for 5 years, they're probably going to stay there long term, and they're not going to, let's say, sacrifice their reputation. And so the more likely you can get a sales or account executive who has influence in the company, the more likely you'll be able to get what you want. But if it's someone who doesn't have that political cred in the company or that push and pull, you might be at the back of the list. Hey, so Hashi Media. So actually, so yeah, I'll give Dustin a chance to share a little bit about themselves.
Yep.
So,
So
I guess you
yeah.
I'll pass it on to you.
Sure. As Tyson mentioned in the intro, I'm co-founder of Hashi Media, and we're a social media marketing agency that assists companies in establishing their brands online. We have a few, well, more than a few reputable companies that trust us for their Japan social and digital marketing. So you can find us at hashimedia.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Dustin Ikeda. Yeah, and I'd be happy to talk with you about marketing in Japan.
And yeah, I think you guys you guys can do both 2 Japanese and 2 foreigners in Japan, right?
Yes, that's right. Right now, most of our customers are international going to Japan, but we also help Japanese companies market in the West.
Yes, and I have introduced Japanese staff to Hashi Media who they have hired. So they do have Japanese staff. Yeah, you can reach them out. Also, is it okay if they reach out to info@hashimedia.com as well?
Yes, they can do that.
But probably better to go to the co-founder directly, Dustin.
Yeah.
Okay, and Dimitri.
Yep. So here at Engine Media, we help automotive dealers and other automotive brands with their social media marketing and their content creation, meaning photography and videography as well. So as Tyson correctly said, we do work with larger agencies as well, like Dens's subsidiaries, with that content creation. So yeah, we specialize in serving clients with luxury goods or high ticket products and services with a long sales cycles. So we're more on the demand generation side of things with, stunning visuals, imagery, and video. And if you want to get in,
yeah, I'm getting both of you guys a LinkedIn, and I've added Dustin to the chat, and I'm adding Dimitri now. But sorry, Dimitri, go ahead.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, so if you want to find us, it's on the next slide, enginemedia.co.go, or you can find me on LinkedIn directly as well.
And are these shots that you've taken, or is this stock photo?
Correct. Right. Absolutely not stock photo. These are ours. Yeah. So we have Cadillac dealerships and a few Volvo dealerships as well at the moment. We design their social marketing strategy, obviously, videography, as I said, and social media channel management as well, and some paid social locally as well. So if you are, if you're in the automotive space, in machinery, things like we've done real estate before as well. House building, that type of thing with a very long sales cycle. That's what we specialize in.
Excellent. And I think I've had both in the chat, and I think you guys answered that one. And are you guys hiring? We're gonna go into Q&A after this, but are you guys hiring for any positions at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we're always on the lookout for talented photographers and videographers, native Japanese writing, on a per project basis. And in 6 to 12 months, we'll be adding more staff to our regular roster. So yeah, by all means, even if it's not right now, even if it's something you're thinking about in the future, about jumping ship, or maybe, per project basis, yeah, get in touch and you can get ahead of the queue, ahead of the line. So obviously 80% of what we do is about cars. So one of the requirements is you actually need to like cars, love cars, like we all do. We're all petrol heads. So yeah, it definitely helps if you have a good eye for architecture, for industry trends, that type of thing. So yeah, having a personal style in your work, if you're a writer, photographer, videographer, having a personal style is of course fine, but we also are looking for people that are somewhat chameleons. They are open-minded and they can imitate a few different styles visually. So yeah, and just being a really good person helps as well. So get in touch if that's you.
And for us, we are actively hiring and we'll have more open positions over the next few months. But on the client facing, like strategic side of things, we have social media account manager, influencer marketing manager. You'll probably need a JLPT N2 or so for that. And then on the creative side, design and copywriting. So design, maybe you'll need N3 or so. Not super involved in Japanese meetings or anything like that. The copywriter should be native Japanese though. So yeah, if you or anyone in your network might be interested in those positions, please feel free to contact me directly or go to our website. Yeah, and we're pretty much fully remote at this point, slightly hybrid. We do have in-person meetings regularly, but 90% of the work is remote. So if that appeals to you, definitely consider applying for a position. And we value career development and growth opportunities. We're still, around 10 people right now and growing over this year. So there's an opportunity for you to make an impact and move upwards in the company. And yeah, if you like gaming, tech, or Japanese culture, that's definitely a plus, and will help you with the creative side of things for us.
Cool. And I've added a link to both your websites and the career page for Dustin's as well. And cool. So I guess we can jump into the Q&A part. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. And if I need more details, I will ask you to, let's say, speak up. But please feel free to put your questions in the chat.
I've got a question for Dustin regarding working at Hashi Media. What type of hybrid remote / in-person split would you say, like percentage wise?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think pretty much 95% remote. So we have remote meetings. We have weekly meetings remotely. So pretty much, I think you can expect a meeting, depending on your role, maybe 3 times a week remotely. But we do have quarterly get-togethers, company-wide get-togethers. And sometimes we have that weekly hands-on meeting in person as well. But pretty much all operations are able to be done remotely. It's just that, different people prefer to have that in-person touch point sometimes. So we do have those in-person meetings, and it's nice.
Right on.
Thanks, Dimitri, for filling the silence. And we do have a question. The first question is, so Japan will implement new rules on influencer marketing from October 1st. Does anyone know how this will affect brands and what are the new rules specifically?
The new rules.
So if I could get that going, you need to, so on the best way to sort of say it, visualize it is Instagram has the, promoted, what is it? It's, on their stories as well and reels. It's like in paid partnership with, it's that kind of selection that's going to need to be required by law on any influencer that's getting paid to talk about an item. Because up until now, I mean, it really started, what they really need to go after is TV. Because all the variety shows in Japan, if they're mentioning a shop by name, or if they're mentioning a product by name, even if there's no price on it, it's like home shopping. It's definitely a paid promotion. But I think there's been such an explosion in micro influencer and like nano influencers as well, that they're rolling out in paid partnership. Like you need to state something like that I think in the caption or on the post of anything that an influencer is talking about. So that's what I'm aware of. That it's basically an attack, you know, a correction on stealth marketing. So maybe you know, on like product placement and things like that. I think that's what they're going after there. So you have to disclose a financial interest when you're promoting products or services to your followers.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the one that's coming into effect in October, and I think it's basically just kind of not standardization, but it's getting closer to what it's like in the US at least. Because in the US at this point, if you are doing a paid promotion, you have to have like hashtag ad or something like that in the post. And Japan doesn't yet have those rules. And like Dimitri says, like nearly all Japanese TV, like variety shows, are stealth advertising. So yeah, it's kind of taking that influencer side of it and getting it more aligned with what it is in the USA. I don't think it affects it a crazy amount, but I think it just gets it so that I guess Japan is trying to protect consumers from this type of stealth marketing, and unfortunately, maybe it's coming after the small guy first. But yeah, I think
that's what I
kind
think.
of just becoming more aligned with international standards.
Thanks, guys. That was my question. And just a quick follow-up to that. So will the onus be on the influencer or on the brands to disclose this?
At this stage, it seems like on the influencer for it. But yeah, if you like, we can look into it in more detail and actually find the you know, the law, the guideline. And yeah, as far as the penalties, hey Tyson, maybe Dustin and I can write a blog post for
Thanks,
you or
guys.
something like that in the future with the details.
Yeah, that would definitely end. We actually have the article made, but we will improve it, and we're already linking to you guys already.
There you go. We got that.
Yes,
got that.
we will do
We
a
got that.
rewrite with some of the contents from this video, and definitely send people your way. Andrew, did you have a follow-up question, or are you good to go?
No, that answered it. Thanks. I'm good to go. Cheers. Thanks for the answer.
Cool.
No worries.
And,
Thanks for the question.
And the next question is, so I guess for you guys, I think it'd probably be better she reached out to one of you guys directly, but do any of you guys have a network or other agencies in UK and Europe? And the reason is they want to establish a central strategy on social media and then vary it a little bit depending on the market. So I guess the question is, do you have a network of other agencies in the UK and Europe?
Yeah, so we've worked with agencies in different regions just for like global campaigns, things like that. So if you just contact me directly and explain the project, then maybe I can connect you to someone.
Yeah, and likewise, not the agencies per se, but I do know somebody in fair trade fashion doing it in Japan with overseas ties. So perhaps I could connect you to that person, and then that person can go that way. So yeah, either way.
Excellent. And Hannah, you can find their contact details higher in the chat. And yeah, so Gabe's question, do writing blogs directed to future customers work in increasing interest for your brand, or it doesn't work at all? So I can answer this question. I would say it does. Writing blogs does help. I would say that writing blogs, or I would say as a single location, or like let's say something that's not national, I think for a single location, writing an article will probably not help for bringing increased awareness to your website, meaning it won't bring more visitors to your website because let's say the target audience is smaller. But for the people who do visit your website, so someone finds you on Google search, they come to your website and they see you write a blog on, let's say, education, or in another case like how do you help your child learn for the Aiken English exam? So like if you write content, blog content on your blog that positions yourself as an expert in education, that can help with converting the people who are already visiting your website. And I would say if you could throw in a video in the blog showing yourself smiling and with happy children, that even helps better. So I would say it's a conversion, like as opposed to, it doesn't create more awareness. You're probably not going to get new people, but it will help you convert those who are already going to the website. And also making sure that in your blog section, maybe in your homepage, you just make sure the best 3 blogs are showing. Not typically people would just go, they'll just say whatever the newest content pops up. And sometimes that's not the best content. It should always be the content that makes you look like an expert. Cool. And we have time for maybe one more question. Or if you guys have anything to add on cool. Cool. Any final questions? If not, cool. I think we are good to go then. So thank all of you for sticking with us to the end. And thank you, Dimitri and Dustin, for sharing a lot of good information. There's probably a lot of content, and there was a ton of content today. So I think on Friday, we're going to send an email to everyone who has registered to the event. So if you want to check this out on YouTube, go through it a little bit more slowly, the content will be there. And yep. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tyson.